is Radio 314 on the Red Ice Radio Network.
Welcome, everyone. This is Lana joining you for the next hour. I think you'll enjoy this interview with Richard Spencer, who's the president of the National Policy Institutes and editor of Washington Summit Publishers and Radix Journal. He attended University of Virginia and University of Chicago and was a doctoral student at Duke University before dropping out to pursue a life of thought crime. He's one of those guys who you can talk to about anything and nothing shocks him, which is a good thing. So sit back and enjoy as we make fun of Cuckservatives, social justice warriors, and libertarians, but we'll take some twists and turns along the way. Richard Spencer, welcome and thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Lana. It's my pleasure.
Well, I feel like I already know you because I've watched your presentations, I've read your articles, but I'm sure there's a whole lot more to you.
No, there's really nothing. I'm a complete monster outside of my online persona. No, it is funny. We do feel like we know each other electronically because we know each other's thoughts on Twitter. We've read each other's articles. When you listen to a podcast, it's almost like you're overhearing a conversation or you're taking part in the conversation sometimes.
Sure.
So it is kind of funny. I mean, I don't think electronic friendships should ever replace, real world friendships. The kind of friendship where you borrow someone's butter or a cup of flour or something. But nevertheless, they are real. And it is kind of amazing that we can interact in this way. I think it's really a great thing. And, we would never know each other without the internet and things like that. And our movement certainly wouldn't exist in the form that it is now without the internet. So it's a great thing.
Well, I wanted to ask you, since you're in Montana, what is the political and social climate like there these days? Is it a bunch of cowboys still that are more rebellious, or what's going on there?
Well, yeah, I'm not really connected with anything political in Montana. I think Montana is one of those interesting places where it shows you how politics would probably be different if there weren't that racial component. That we have that certainly informs the kind of left-right divide in the country. So you actually will have Democrats like Schweitzer and some others who are kind of they're not leftist. they're kind of good old boys who will get some federal handouts for the logging industry or something. It's a kind of they're not trying to subvert society and they're in a way. They're the kind of people that you would want to have a beer with. So it's a very different climate. So you actually do have a stronger Democratic Party out here. But I would say that the general mentality is one of just leave me alone, kind of libertarianism. And there's so much space out here that that kind of deeply American mentality still makes sense, where you can be self-sufficient, you can kind of get away from it all, you can go off the grid. And so I think that is the de facto and very natural political mentality of people in Montana. But I think in a way, I'm very disconnected from that. I mean, I respect that, and that's how I like to be. I would love for people to just leave me alone sometimes. But I think in a way that kind of American libertarianism is totally inadequate for facing the challenges of the 21st century. The geopolitical challenges and the racial challenges, certainly, and in a way also the moral challenges. And so I think it's something that is, it is very natural and understandable and admirable, but I think it's something we need to overcome. I think we need to start thinking about things that are different, that are more than just leave me alone, dude.
Yeah, it also seems that libertarianism, it would only potentially work with like-minded or like-cultured white people, because try and teach the Somali population about the non-aggression principle or anarcho-capitalism, and we'll see how that goes, right?
Right. Well, this is an interesting thing because, the things like liberalism, we're talking about classical liberalism in a way, and that we think of these as these abstract ideas, but they really do have a social basis. They have an anthropology, so to speak. And if you see where libertarianism works, it works in, say, Switzerland, which is a maybe not multicultural quite society, certainly a multilinguistic and a multicultural society where you have 4 different languages. And there is a kind of, and it's also all an entirely white population, very good immigration control. So libertarianism kind of makes sense in that context, where it's just leave me alone, let's keep our distance, let's be neutral. We're surrounded by big, dangerous powers like Prussia or Germany or France, the Austrian Empire. Let's be neutral. This kind of liberalism has a history to it, and it makes sense. Certainly, libertarianism makes sense in the American frontier, where you can always move, you can always keep going. Where our kind of rugged individualism is not just it's necessary. In fact, it's not just an admirable trait. And so I think there is this kind of history. There's an anthropology to liberalism that we sometimes forget. But as I said before, I think in a way these kinds of things, their time has come and gone. We don't have the luxury of saying just leave me alone, or let's build a fence around my neighbor and the world that we live in. We need to think geopolitically. We need to think in terms of our shared broader identity. We need to think racially, and that's really the challenge that we have to face. It's one which again where just leave me alone is not going to be adequate.
Yeah, I know all kinds of different libertarians, but there are some that are just, hey, well, if the market dictates it, but it's population replacement. Well, if that's what the market wants, it's like,
well, those
okay.
people are truly awful. I was in a way giving a generous portrait of libertarians but yes, the kind of left libertarian who they are truly heinous individuals, and it's kind of funny because it's not even a just leave me alone. It's an absolute positive affirmation of whatever new sexual or degenerate innovation they can think of that is inherently good. These kind of left libertarians, they don't recognize the idea of like a community would want to be religiously defined, or a community would want to exclude people. That's not acceptable for them. You have to let in all sorts of new perversions. That's truly being a libertarian. I guess the irony of the left libertarians is that they ultimately require a global government, and in order to enforce tolerance of whatever new degeneracy they come up with. So they kind of, in a way, the left libertarian is at a kind of always an inherently contradictory outlook. But they couldn't accept the idea that a little town in Montana would say, we are a Protestant town and no blacks or anything like that. They could freely choose that. That could be their cultural decision that is totally consensual. Yet that would be unacceptable to them. And that's, in a way, the kind of a more accurate portrayal of the kind of libertarians or liberals or leftists that we're dealing with. They're anti-freedom at the end of the day.
Now, how did you come to where you are politically? What route did you take? Were you a conservative or libertarian?
I took a twisting road, but then at the same time, I do believe in Nietzsche's imperative of become who you are, and that's actually the title of this conference that we're holding. But so I feel like I've never really changed, but then I certainly did take a lot of different paths. I remember when I was a kid, I probably was a conservative, maybe in the same way that a lot of people root on Donald Trump, in the sense that I kind of wanted to root on the team that was kind of the boldest or the most badass or the toughest guys. So I remember I would write these little essays when I was in middle school of why I thought Pat Buchanan was a great guy. And this is when he ran for president in the early 1992. And I remember I actually found one where I defended David Duke when he ran for president.
Nice.
I wonder what my teacher thought about that one. But yeah, so I liked Ross Perot. I basically just liked people who I saw as kind of tough guys and bold and, things like that. But I think when I became a young adult, I, in a way, was more attracted to the left and the far left. As I started to gain, a philosophic and political consciousness, I really saw that there was something deeply wrong with the world. I saw some some nihilism at the very heart of American life. And I guess what I was reacting against was, you could say, it's the Walmartization, or it's the triumph of the last man, as Nietzsche defined him, the triumph of someone who's totally self-satisfied with consuming and buying and selling. There's no ideal beyond, can I get a new low price microwave? And I really wanted to reject that. I wanted something else. So I actually was very interested in critical theory and the Frankfurt School. I've always been deeply interested in Nietzsche. He's probably inspired me more than any other writer or thinker. But I was very, in a way, like this is 15 years ago now. I was almost kind of a leftist. I was anti-capitalist. Capitalism was destroying culture and humanity and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah,
that was really my consciousness. And I look back at it now, and I obviously am different to a certain degree, but I understand myself. I'm not one of those people who, and there are some of these people. I think. Believe it or not, even Kevin McDonald seemed to have taken a turn like this, where they were real genuine leftist, and then they woke up and they really changed. It wasn't like that for me. I can kind of recognize the man who I am now and the young man who I was, in college and graduate school, where I was probably closer to being a leftist than anything. I think that's good, because I don't think our movement's going to get anywhere if we just come from the right only.
Sure, I agree.
Or if we. The other thing that I always hate is this notion that we are like the Republican Party or conservatives, only more so.
Yeah.
I hate that. I don't have anything in common with Rick Santorum or Newt Gingrich or Mike Huckabee or all these just horrible individuals. I don't agree with them on anything, and I certainly don't agree with them on the most important things. And so I think it's true that our movement, most of the people are coming from the right. They're former conservatives maybe or something. But I think if we're going to move forward and we're going to become a better and brighter and more dynamic and interesting movement, I think we have to integrate in left-wing energies. And it's funny, at actually our last conference, the MPI's last conference in February, where we did a conference on beyond conservatism, which we talked a lot about these ideas. I actually met a young man who was a former environmentalist and an Obama supporter who was a big he donated his time to the Obama campaign, and he's come this whole way over the past 7 years, and I think that was great. I think we need more people like that. In a way, we need people who are searching for something, who know that there's something wrong at the very heart of the world, and who want an answer and something that's idealistic. And so I think that's great. I think that if our movement is to have a future, we need to attract people like that. We need to integrate left-wing forces, and we need to not just be, the far right of the conservative movement or some awful notion like that. We need to be coming from a different universe.
Yeah, I told you this, but I love seeing the left confused by people like us who we can be pagans, we eat organic, we're actually concerned with animals, the environment, and, a lot of us are anti-capitalist. So they seem shocked that there's opposition to cultural Marxism that isn't this this usual conservative stereotype, but much more radical.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I talked a little bit about this at the on the Beyond Conservative conference, and that is that we have these things that are basically idea clusters. And it's kind of like, if you're a conservative, that means that you want to destroy the environment and build new shopping malls in place of the redwoods. And also you're a profound Christian. And also you also love global capitalism. And also you want to bomb Arabs into oblivion in order to protect Israel. All of those ideas, why would any one person hold all of those ideas? And why are any of those ideas inherently conservative? In many ways, they're the antithesis of conservatism. And so, yeah, I think it's great. I think we need it. It's the way I described it is conservatism is like or the right, the mainstream right in America and in Europe. And again, those certainly different things, but I think they actually have a lot more similarities than they do differences. It's a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces don't fit. And there's no reason why a devout Christian should also support global capitalism and charter schools and bombing Middle Eastern countries. It doesn't make sense. And so I think one thing that our movement can do is to really shake up that jigsaw puzzle and really rearrange the pieces and start to think, what are the pieces of our soul? I think that without question, something that we should think about, and I think we should do more than think about it, is the importance of the natural world to us. That's something that we shouldn't just preserve it as a natural resource or due to environmentalism. We should support the natural world for aesthetic grounds, the fact for spiritual grounds, that it's a place for renewal. One of the fundamental reasons why I live in Montana is just I can look out and be inspired by living in a place in the mountains, by going into the forest, swimming in the lakes, biking through the trees.
Yeah.
These are things that are just deeply important, and they are more important than humans. I just it's just like the religious right nut jobs who are I think they envision some new coming world where we'll have 15 billion human beings on the planet, and we'll all have two cars, and we'll all be middle class Americans, buying stuff at Kmart. It's a horrifying vision.
Yes, it is.
And we really need to understand that there are actually things that are deeper and more long lasting than human lives, and that this is that kind of that anti-humanism that I think we need to tap into. That there are these things are deeply important to us, and they're deeply important to our ancestors. We owe it to our children to preserve this beautiful natural world. So yeah, I think I've gone off on a tangent
It's
as
okay.
usual, but yeah, we're anti-conservative in many ways. If is conservatism as it's been defined by these nut jobs.
Isn't it interesting how the left, they used to talk a lot about overpopulation, and now all of a sudden, since mass immigration, they're just silent on it.
Right. Yeah. They've totally reversed course from where they were in the 70s. Yeah. It's now you're going to be impoverished unless you allow in these immigrants. That's usually what they tell Americans, at least. Like, oh, we need these if we're going to have a bright economy and pay your Social Security. It's like almost like they're threatening them or something.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, Italy won't survive without third world immigrants in their country. It's funny.
Right. Like, do you want your pension? Well, you're going to have to allow these boat people in. Yeah.
Now, do you still make a separation between conservative and neocon?
Well, that's actually a very interesting question. Yes, it's interesting because I would say I have a very specific definition of neocons, and I think as often happens that neocon became an almost slur word. I think there was actually wasn't there a Rolling Stones song where Mick Jagger said like go fuck your neocons or something something like that. But basically, it became a slur word. But the fact is, the neoconservative movement has a history to it, and it's actually in a way I have a kind of ironical admiration for neoconservatives, and the reason is that it's a movement of Jews who were Trotskyist in the 1930s. Famously, at the City College of New York, they were in Alcove 1 or something, and they would debate the Stalinist in Alcove 2. They would have these, debates of people of Jews, American Jews, who were kind of marginalized, who were all kind of, intense, heady intellectuals. And they built a movement. They went from being Trotskyists to becoming Cold War liberals. They had their own little magazines. In a way, a lot like identitarians or white nationalists or whatever you would like to call us. They were kind of marginalized people, but who did real heady, interesting stuff and had their own little magazines. We have our own little websites. And then probably by the 70s or 80s, the neoconservatives started to take a turn to the right. mainly because the rise of the New Left in the late 60s, and the neocons would basically view the New Leftists as anti-Zionist. Because the neocons, I think, one thing that gives them their power, and what makes them an interesting movement to think about and study, is that it's a movement that has a lot of tensions in it. And this comes from its history of being a Jewish movement, of being a former Trotskyist movement, a Marxist movement, effectively, is that they seem to be caught between a lot of things. They seem to be caught between a kind of Cold War era American nationalism and anti-Russian feelings and anti-Soviet feelings. And they're also caught between a Zionism, and that is a religious and ethno-nationalism about them, the Jewish people. And they're also caught between a kind of global democratic universalism. And you can see all of these factors kind of pop up in the Bush administration, where George Bush was at once this, and George Bush is not a neocon himself, but he was deeply influenced by them. Bush was at once an American nationalist, a cowboy, good old fashioned American guy. And then at the other level, he had these just ridiculous, almost religious like dreams of democratizing the planet. God wants every human soul to be free, or something like this. And then at the same time, he was a Zionist, although not as hardcore of a Zionist as the neocons would want. Interestingly, he actually spoke about the rights of the Palestinian people to have a state. Anyway, so I think that's what a neocon is. They're kind of caught between those things, and I think also the neocons are in a way history. Neocons are a very interesting movement. It's one we're studying, and it's one that was in a way ruined by its success, where in the early 2000s, neocons really had power. They were well placed in the Bush administration. They were effectively in control of the Republican of the conservative movement and Republican intellectuals. No one, when I was just coming out of college, no one of any consequence was really questioning neocon ideology. And they were in a way ruined by their success. We saw what neocons in power looked like, and it looked like the Iraq War debacle and other things. And so in a way, they now are a very well-funded group, and they are certainly still well-connected. But they're in a way history. I don't think they have much legitimacy at all. And in a way, what the conservative movement has become, and you can see this in this Cuckservative phenomenon that people are talking about, which I think is just totally hilarious, and I support. But the current conservative movement are in a way the Gentile residue of the Bush administration. It's the kind of non-Jewish, doofuses and mediocrities or sub-mediocrities who were promoted by neocons, who are kind of the allies of the neocons, who are still there. And they've learned nothing. They've forgotten nothing, and they've forgotten everything and learned nothing. And they're just still there, kind of saying their same meaningless slogans. That is basically what the conservative movement is today in the United States. And I think this is one of the reasons why people who are more intelligent, who want to be part of something more real, more vital, more dynamic and forward-looking, are just simply making fun of them now. I mean, the conservatives in America are just a big joke. They seem to kind of represent in their own person. They kind of represent a kind of white picket fence conservative America, Christian America, but in their actions, they're just participating in the displacement of European Americans who are effectively their own children.
That's right.
It's why someone who is cuckold, someone who gets cucked, is someone who doesn't have control of his future. He doesn't have control of his wife, but that's in a way the lesser aspect of it. It's about not your genes aren't being passed down. You're looking after the offspring of another man. And I think that is just a piercingly accurate portrayal of these conservative, douchey, obese doofuses. is that they're they want all these new Hispanics or Africans or Caribbeans to embrace conservative values,
Yeah.
whatever the hell that means. But they're basically looking after other people's children, and they are also abandoning their own children. And so that's why I think the whole cuck slur. It's at one level it's like it's an animal of Twitter. It's where Twitter is just built for making fun of people and being vulgar and funny and sarcastic and so on and so forth. But so it's clearly that. But on another level, calling someone a cuckservative, I think is a piercingly accurate way of referring to them.
The Daily Beast, the filthy commie rag, they wrote about this right-wing civil war, and trying to make sense of the word cuckservative and just failing miserably. It's hilarious. They just can't stand that there's another opposition that's not conservatism.
Right, and they don't really get it. That's what I've read all these kind of liberal or conservative criticisms of cuckservative. None of them really get what's happening. And we're the only ones who really get it. But at the same time, I think they kind of unconsciously get it because the reason they're reacting to it. This is not something that just me and my Twitter followers are doing. Like, this is much bigger than that, and it's really getting under the skin of these conservatives. And that's because it's real, it's accurate. What it is, it's not a civil war within conservatism or the Republican Party. It's absurd.
Yes, it is.
It's an identitarian. An alt-right or a radical vanguard that is ridiculing people who are deserving of ridicule and who have nothing in common with our movement. I mean, I think that's what it's about. It's kind of like, we're not going to play the lesser of two evils. We're not going to choose Coke and Pepsi every year and say, oh, well, Obama's really bad, so I guess I should just vote for Mike Huckabee this time. We're not doing that. We're saying, no, you are incapable of facing the challenges of the 21st century. You are effectively a cuck. You are stupid and worthless, and we are superior to you, and so we are going to demean you. And that's what it's about. The other thing, I mean, I'm sorry to get if I'm sounding too mean or something, but for anyone who has ever been around conservatives, and I have, the notion that these people are the best, these are great individuals, or they have the best educations, or they're the most cultured. That is, anyone who has ever been around them, that is a complete joke. They are all such mediocrities.
Unfortunately, yes.
And in a way, I wonder. I mean, I don't know if this was I don't know what the origin of that is exactly. Whether it's neocons would prefer to deal with people whom they could easily control. I mean, I think that probably it's a part of it. People like Glenn Beck and people like that. They are popular in a way because they're just goofballs, and people like that. They're like people who are attracted to evangelical televangelist or something. It's effectively, this is what this kind of thing is. But whatever the case, if you are an intelligent person, someone with a deep soul, someone who wants something more, or who wants to change the world, you would never conceivably become a conservative. It's just there is, I don't know of a counterexample to this. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we're seeing this. And, I was emailing this person today, and I mentioned this. I was kind of like, the leftist during the period of the 1960s, leftist won not because they outnumbered traditional Americans. They certainly didn't. They won because they had the best music. Leftists won in the 1960s because they had the philosophy and mentality that was dynamic, that was forward-looking, that was compelling, that was dangerous. There was a real alternative to the status quo. And that's why they won. And I think you might see an analogous thing happening now. I mean, the alt-right, so-called, or identitarians in North America, we are so, the degree to which we are underfunded, the degree to which the mainstream conservatives they are rolling in dough. I mean, the Heritage Foundation, which is a major think tank, has $100 and some million endowment. So they have so much more money than us.
And what do they do with it?
What do they do with it? And how do they change society in any way? Like, what cultural battle have they won? Done tax cuts for billionaires. They have lost on every front. And we are the more dynamic. We are this group that's underfunded, but is more powerful.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The caged bird will sing, I think. It sings better. Yeah, unfortunately, and I know there's different types of Christians. I have lots of Christians in my family, but biblical dogma has made people flat. It's giving them tunnel vision. They've become out of touch with the natural world as though it's all figured out. And they've become boring since many are so cut off from their ancient culture, which is interesting and actually has a lot to offer.
Yeah, they really are boring. They're a collection of Sunday school teachers. That that might be the
Yeah.
case. Yeah, it is interesting. I think one of Christianity's powers, in a way, is that it is very flexible, and the Christian religion can, and this is a compliment of it, the Christian religion can really be informed by the culture that adopts it. And so, the difference between Germanic Christianity that we see in Europe and in traditional Europe in the Middle Ages and so on and so forth, and say the Christianity of Paul or the early Christians. I mean, these are two vastly different things, and they're also very different from what I guess we would call Byzantine Christianity or Roman Christianity in the Eastern Empire. These are very different things, and I think that is what is interesting about Christianity, is that it's this monotheistic religion that is flexible and that can be informed by the people who take it up. Certainly, Voodoo, which is a Christian Catholic religion for Haitians and others, that is a very different type of Christianity, but it's still in a way Christian. And I guess so. What I mean is that Christianity can take on all these different forms. I think one interesting thing is that in America, it seems to only take on the form of leftism, or a kind of passivism, or a kind of simply of like, well, I want to limit immigration and defend my people, but Jesus won't let me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's interesting that it's happened that way. But I unfortunately don't really know of a group. I mean, maybe you could say Orthodox Christianity in Russia, although that's something I don't know a great deal about. It seems to be tied to something deeper. It seems to be even tied to the Roman Empire at some level, and it seems to be a cultural sustaining force. But again, I'm distanced from it. Sometimes we have a tendency to romanticize things that we're distanced from. But Christianity in the Western world and America has just become a kind of warmed over liberalism. It's really it's kind of a pathetic religion, and it's a religion that doesn't really believe in itself.
So really, it's not a shame if this were to phase out, because I think you wrote somewhere in your conservatism essay, but this is the end of something, but now we can maybe possibly have something more primordial and powerful that can replace it, right?
Yeah, I hope. I think to be authentic to where we are now, we have to, in a way, be authentic to the disintegration of something.
Yeah.
We can't pretend that the West is, about to colonize the world and explore the universe, and this kind of Faustian West that existed in history and it existed in our imagination. That's not what the West is now.
No.
The West is a bunch of human resource directors talking about microaggressions, or the West is some stifling, suffocating, bureaucratic socialism. The West is Femen or people walking around naked in a church and screaming at people like who are those horrible Pussy Riot or something. The West is about just bourgeois Americans kind of feeling hopeless and living in their suburban home and not engaging in the world and not thinking that they have really something to defend, just hoping if things get so bad, they'll just move to the next suburb down the road. That's what the West is now. What we are in a nihilistic downward spiral. And in order to be authentic, we have to recognize that. And we can't pretend that, we're white, the white race that of Beethoven and Copernicus. No, at the moment we are a white race in a deep cycle of degeneration.
I mean, look around. We're in a sad state, folks. Yeah.
Right. But we need to recognize that to be authentic. You need to recognize, you have to be realistic. But we need to ask, does this need to happen? Can we come out the other end of this nihilistic spiral and survive it and be better? And I take that Nietzschean imperative. Whatever doesn't kill us will make us stronger. Maybe this is a terrible trial that we have to go through, and not all of us are going to make it to the mountaintop. But maybe at the end of this trial, we'll in a way be thankful that we pursued liberalism to its very end, that we pursued Americanism to its very end, and that in the end, both in the sense that it's going to cease, but also the end in the Hegelian sense of the ultimate outcome of this root idea, and that we're in a way better for it, that we experienced it. And I think that is an authentic philosophy for our time.
That's why we should celebrate when they push hard and fast and do outrageous things and say blatant things. That's a good thing for us in the end.
Well, I love social justice warriors. I mean, I might donate money to them or something. I want them to become even more just ridiculous. I think it's good. It kind of, in a way, they're in a way pointing themselves out, and they're they're taking their ideas seriously. I love it. I want more of it.
And sadly, I think you said too, these granola communists, I like that. They're actually personifying in our mind what we think white guilt is, right? That's the sad truth.
They make white guilt really unattractive. That's another good thing because they're all ugly. So it's great to kind of associate, white guilt and universalism and stuff with a bunch of people who no one would conceivably want to sleep with.
Got that right.
So yeah, I mean, you have to ride it. I think my friend in France, Romain Bernard, he has this great metaphor, which is kind of like, if we are able to see this tidal wave coming, we're able to see this terrible monsoon that's about to destroy us all. But what do? Do you run from a tidal wave? Well, the problem is you can't outrun a tidal wave. Do you stand like Hamlet imagined in his famous soliloquy? You'll face down all the slings and arrows. You'll stand up waving an American flag against a tidal wave. Well, good luck with that. You're going to be overwhelmed. But what we can do is pick up a surfboard and ride the tidal wave. You ride the tiger. And again, can we see that at the end of this great cataclysm that we're experiencing, is there a brightness at the end of it? Can we come out of it stronger? Can we kind of ride this disintegration of the modern world and allow it to open up space for the kind of, deeply connected identitarian European empire that we want to see, for our grandchildren?
Yeah, you said, I'm going to quote you, before we have a left problem or a social justice warrior problem or a black or Jewish problem, we have a white problem. So tell us about this.
Well, I think this has to do with the morality of white people. And in that speech, which I gave at the American Renaissance Conference, I talked about this situation that I think most of your listeners would be aware of, which is the Rotherham controversy.
Yes.
And I don't want to go into the details, but effectively for decades, the children of Rotherham were being raped and abused and demeaned by a bunch of Arabs and Muslims. And this was going on. And granted, it wasn't on the front page of the papers making headlines, but everyone kind of knew about it. Everyone was hearing these tales, these rumors. And yet they were afraid to investigate it because they knew that it had this racial component. That it was a lot like cucking that we're talking about. It is basically losing control of your future, losing control of your children, allowing your children to be humiliated, racially humiliated. And, you could say those people, the town council of Rotherham, who ignored this, who just wanted it to go away, you could say they're a bunch of cowards. But I think just calling them cowards is in a way begging deeper questions. Because if the perpetrators of these terrible gang rapes were white people, I am positive that the town council of Rotherham would have prosecuted them, investigated them, made them accountable to the law and so on and so forth. So they weren't. So in that, if they were white, they wouldn't have been cowards. So there's something deeper. And I think this gets at this guilt complex, this white guilt, which is in a way a kind of morality complex. And it views white consciousness and white power as the ultimate evil.
Original
More evil,
sin.
yeah, a kind of original sin. And it's in a way more evil than gang rape. And again, that when I say that, I'm sure that's kind of shocking, but you have to think it through. And that's what they are basically
Yeah.
doing. They are saying we would rather that our children, and even if they weren't literally their direct children, they were their children. This is the city council that is responsible for the future. We would rather have our children be brutally raped than be called a racist. And again, I'm describing this in kind of vivid terms, but I'm doing that in order to prove a point. And that is where we are. And you have to understand that as a deeply, as a morality. And that's at the heart of it. So we need to get at that morality. We can't just talk about things like our movement can't just be about like race differences. And so in a way, I'm in a friendly and constructive manner, I'm criticizing people who identify themselves as race realists, who want to talk about IQ differences or crime rates or something. And this is what we just want to keep talking about: is that, oh, blacks IQ, African American IQ is 85. We can't give them affirmative action to go to college because they can't do the work. Blah blah. All of that stuff is true, and all of that stuff is important. I would never doubt that. But if we're going to really change things, we need to access that moral aspect of people. And I'm talking about white people. You could also question this. You could look at like, oh, the Frankfurt School or so-called cultural Marxists. They've been so devastating. Well, why is it that this very small group of people were able to be this devastating? If you believe that they were. Why is it that they were? If it wasn't that they resonated with something in the hearts and minds of white people, you can't really force people to adopt these, an ideology if it's just totally alien. You can't force people to, become, the cargo cult or voodoo or something. That would never have taken hold with white Americans. But there was something about this deep ideology that is anti-white, that's anti-white power, it's anti-white consciousness, that got a hold of our people at some level. And we need to understand why and where that is. What is the moral, mindscape of whites that they accept their own displacement? And that is, you can talk about this idea of immigration's really bad. Oh, there's people. This is the effectively white genocide or whatever. You can talk about that all day long without getting to the fact that most white people ultimately embrace it, and most white people think that people like me and you are evil, that we're in a way worse than murderers. They will give second chances to murderers. They'll allow a murderer to be reformed. But someone who has a European consciousness and cares about the future of European children, imagines a future of a great European empire, that kind of person is deeply evil. That person should be ashamed, that we need to point out that person. That we need to hold, as happened to me last fall, we need to hold town meetings in which we discuss this person that we didn't even know was living here, but who thinks these thoughts. God, we need to have everyone come together and pass resolutions.
Yeah,
right. Grab the pitch. Why is that? What is that about us that leads that? And what is that moral aspect to us? So I think in a way, this is, if we do want to change the world, this is the most important thing we need to talk about. We need to talk about the white problem.
Yeah, and I notice a lot of white people who aren't on this page, they get so uncomfortable when you bring up white privilege, white guilt. Let's actually get to the meat of this and really talk about it. It's almost like dealing with a mind control victim or someone that's been mentally abused or something. They go on the defense, like the program kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, white people have, in a way, been mentally abused. That's not a bad way of talking about it. They have. I mean, and I think this shows a kind of generational divide of between kind of older conservatives who want to go back to some, imagined 1950s era where all Americans were patriotic and good and loved each other or something. And people who are my age. Remember, I'm not exactly a young person. I'm actually 37, but who have basically experienced nothing but anti-European leftism in education, in the media, in the world, of what's being taught. I mean, we are in a way victims. We've been mentally abused, mentally enslaved, and this is the kind of thing we need to talk about. This is something we need to delve in. This is the stuff that's really important. That's going to have consequences, and that's what I also. I mean, I am an idealist in the sense that I believe how we understand things, our consciousness is what changes the world. I don't really believe in. I mean, at some level, this might shock people. I don't fundamentally worry about demographics in the sense that oh, we have between 11 and 20 million illegal immigrants, and whites are going to become a minority in 2042 or whatever. I don't worry about any of that because if whites had the right consciousness,
That's right.
none of this would be a problem. Like, illegal immigrants and all Hispanic immigrants in America, they came here so they can leave peacefully. Like, we can change this overnight. We can do it in a completely peaceful fashion. We can change everything overnight in an instant if we think it. And that is because our consciousness and our ideals and our ideas are more powerful than matter. I'm an anti-materialist. The way we understand the world is more important than the actual world. Like, we can change reality if we think it, if we're willing to dream it. But if we only concentrate on the atoms, or some demographic statistic, we're just begging the question. We're avoiding the real issue, and that is how we perceive the world.
That's right. And if you raise your kids right, I say this all the time, armor them with the truth and teach them to love their people and love who they are. It doesn't matter what comes at them, what people say, none of it will get into their heads if you make
Right.
them strong enough.
Oh, I love social justice warriors. They entertain me throughout the day. I love watching their videos. It just brings a grin to my face. They don't affect me in the slightest outside of entertainment. So it's because I have the right attitude. I mean, that seems almost trite to say have a good attitude, but it's right. It's true. When you have the right consciousness, people like Pussy Riot or Femin or Barack Obama or Mike Huckabee or whomever in Europe or whatever, these people melt away because you're able to see through them and you're able to see a future beyond them.
Now, how do you think a lot of white people, especially conservatives, are going to handle becoming a racial minority in America? Are they just going to kind of surrender to this mono glob, or is something else going to kick in?
Well, that's a very good question because it's a psychological question, and I'm thinking of the what is it, the 5 stages of guilt, the Kubler-Ross model of denial. What is it? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, or something like that. I think whites might go through something like that. I would say that the way that I would describe their psychology now is somewhere at denial and maybe even bargaining stage of mourning, and they seem to deny that this is happening, and it's in a way one is able to deny it's happening because America is a radically segregated place. I mean, you can go live in a suburb in Ohio, or even you can go live in Manhattan Island, and in a way only see white people with the occasional Hispanic busboy. So I think people are in that denial stage, but I think they're also in a kind of bargaining. I would say that white conservatives now, what they imagine is that the demographics are going to change, but nothing will really change. So, we're going to convince all of these Hispanics that they should embrace, the flag and God and the Constitution and Sarah Palin. And so it will just all be the same. People will just have different skin color or something. So in a way, they're kind of, and the Republican Party will benefit from this, of course, because Hispanics are natural conservatives, as we know. And I think that's the kind of diluted bargaining that they're engaging in. That the demographics will change, but nothing will change. And I think in a way the whole Donald Trump phenomenon is that kind of creeping unconscious awareness that things really are going to change and that we might need some kind of tough guy, some kind of fascistic oligarch to hold back the tide of color or something. I think that this is how I would describe the consciousness of conservatives. But again, I don't know what will happen once we get decades on. Whether they'll really pass through the bargaining stage and pass through to identity. I mean, this is the kind of question: will whites pass through to a stage of depression and acceptance, where they basically accept their own displacement? They just basically don't see any kind of future for their children. Or will some of us, at least, pass through the stage with a heightened awareness of identity? And remember, identity is, you need an other to have an identity. I mean, that's an important thing that we sometimes forget. If you're only around Protestant white people, you're going to kind of think that the entire world is Protestant white people. And that leads to a certain naivete, that leads to all sorts of different things.
Sure, yeah.
And I think that in a way, maybe some of us are going to confront the other and see the other and then finally maybe see our own reflection in the other's eyes and in a way understand who we are. So is this going to is the fact that we're bringing in these millions of Hispanics and foreign and Hispanics, it's kind of a stupid demographic name. We're bringing in all these people who are racially and culturally radically different, who have a different history. If we bring these in, will we finally be able to understand who we are? And I think that is what will happen. I think that some of us will recognize that. And I also think that our movement wouldn't have a future unless we thought like this, whether we thought that we would be the outcome. A lot of conservatives like to think of themselves as kind of beautiful losers, that we're like Hamlet. We'll go up against the slings and arrows and we'll kind of die valiantly in some great suicide mission where we're the last people defending faith and tradition against the onslaught of liberalism or something. And that's their consciousness. A lot of paleo-conservatives, so-called, or traditionalist, is essentially they see themselves as a noble suicide. Well, I don't think like that. I think that we should see ourselves as the outcome of this historical trajectory that we are experiencing right now, and that we have a future. That at the end of the day, after America's collapsed, after whites are 20% of the population, that those who survive it and who experience it will have a hard core to their identity.
That's right.
That they will be new people. And so in a way, that sense, I'm the ultimate progressive. And I have a great deal of hope for the future. And I think that we are part of the force of history.
Exactly. I mean, this is nothing new. This has been in history, and populations do ebb and flow, and some tribes die where others stay alive.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'm like, okay, if we have 100,000 really intelligent, aware white people who made it through this, we can get the population up again. I want quality. I want quality, not quantity, is what I'm saying.
Well, think about the origins of the white race in the Ice Age. I mean, how many of us were there? A couple thousand, maybe a couple hundred at some. I mean, we forget. We don't need billions. We need a hard core of real people who will fight and who know who they are. That's all we need.
Now, I wanted to ask you this, left versus right. I hear so many people in alt media saying, I'm beyond that. But is it even truly possible? Because everything in our world is about opposing forces. Even our brain is two hemispheres. So can we be beyond left and right?
Wow. That's a very good way of thinking about it. I think there probably are two levels to this. I think there's the superficial level. And I would say that that's the kind of thing where you take some of these stupid Facebook quizzes and they'll tell you who you are, kind of thing of like, oh, do you support abortion? Do you support environmental regulations? Do you support the Iraq War? Oh, okay, we've determined you're a centrist liberal or something. I think in terms of that, those kind of stupid slide rules, we are definitely well beyond that kind of nonsense. And as I said, earlier in this conversation, we should never think of ourselves as, conservatives only more so. Mike Huckabee on steroids. That's the last thing we want to be. So I think we're definitely beyond left and right in that sense. But I agree with what you're saying that there almost needs to be attention to us. And I think that's a very interesting idea. And I can kind of go back to what I was talking about, the neoconservatives. Why they are an interesting movement is because they actually have a tension in there. That there's a tension between American nationalism and Jewish Zionism and a kind of global, democratic universalism. And they're kind of fighting between those energies within their hearts. They're divided onto themselves, kind of thing. And that's why they're interesting. And I think that we should have that tension too. I think maybe you can think of a lot of these really productive tensions, like the tension between our Faustian spirit and our traditional spirit. And I think you and I are probably alike in this way that we're kind of caught between two drives of like we want to be traditionalists. We understand the value of family and home and like the little things and things that are organic and homemade and so on and so forth. Like that has a deep power for us, as it does for a lot of people, and that's a good thing. But we're also torn between our desire to explore the universe and
yeah, that's right.
Get in build. The fact that Americans have abandoned NASA, abandoned manned space travel.
So
we
sad.
have abandoned. It is truly sad, and I know that there are maybe some technical reasons, but I wonder if all those technical reasons are just rationalizations for our own cowardly nature.
Yeah.
There was something that Faustian soul that you can see in Stanley Kubrick's 2001, that kind of desire to transcend ourselves. And I think in a way that, to go back to that tension between traditionalism on the one hand and a kind of Faustian spirit on the other, I think that's a really productive tension that makes us better. And I think that could be the kind of left-right divide of the future. That is this thing where it's an unending battle. You never solve it, but it kind of inspires us, and there'll be great people on each side of it. And I think that could be the great, left-right dialectic of the future.
I like that. Very good. Well, I wanted to ask you the last question before we talk all about the conference, but I'm curious. So how do you both plan to raise your child knowing all of this?
Well, I don't want to get too personal, but I maybe this sounds kind of funny, but I have a very laid back attitude towards children, and I think that they're gonna be okay. I think that I'm not gonna I don't, and I would say this is not just me. I would say this for anyone who thinks like us who have children. I don't think we should indoctrinate them. I don't think we should make them read, our books or listen to this podcast at age 7 so that we get. I think we should just allow them to be children, and we're going to inherently instill in them our values, even if we're not trying to. and we've inherently instilled our values in them genetically.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I think that we should be very laid back, and I don't want to force children to be anything. And as you know, if you, particularly with young men, but also with young women, if you try to force them to be something, they're going to do the exact opposite.
That's right. Oh yeah, they rebel against their parents. That's what they do.
The grand strategy, I guess, would be to maybe be a social justice warrior. But,
exactly.
So I don't. I just want to be very laid back. I don't, and I don't want them to feel like they're burdened by, the fact that I'm a radical intellectual. I just want them to just be their own person, and just to they can find their own path, and they're going to have to. So that's my laid back
It's
advice
true. And you
for
plant little
parents.
seeds along the way. I mean, there's certain things I laughed at my grandmother, my parents said that actually they were right, and then you change in your 20s and then you see it different in your 30s. So what's it going to be like later?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I see a lot of myself in my paternal grandfather. He was a big bourbon drinker. These are little things, but they're in a way kind of telling things. I kind of I like that. Once 9:30 p.m. hits, I like to go get my glass and get a good bourbon and kind of maybe do a little bit of work or read a little and look outside. I kind of have his mentality. I've recently discovered traditional shaving, shaving with a brush and
Very
organic artisan
nice.
soaps
Yeah, I
and
love it.
safety razor. These are kind of silly things, and they're definitely not political or something. But I kind of you do kind of become your grandparents in maybe a good
Well,
way,
there's certain
you know.
nuances in European culture I never want to see go, like table manners or
Right.
chivalry. There's certain aspects that I love, and it would be so sad to see that disappear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this gets back to what I was talking about, like the left and right of the future is going to be this tension between our Faustian nature and our traditional nature. That idea for little things, little ways of doing things that are inefficient actually, but are the best.
Well, of course, we must talk about your conference. It's on Halloween,
Hmm.
isn't it, in DC?
Yes, I kind of I find that amusing. The ghouls and goblins will be out. I guess
Exactly.
that's maybe what our
So we
enemies will
could
see it
come
as.
we could come dressed like social justice warriors, right?
That would be hilarious. Yes, I would support that. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I've done a number of conferences now, and I try to get better at them, and I try to in a way try to be critical of myself. Like, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? And a couple of lessons that I've learned is that you need to have great speakers because that's the kind of headline of the conference, and that's what people see. And so I've really tried to get some great ones, like people who have been on your radio programs: Kevin McDonald, Guillaume Fay, Jack Donovan,
Keith
um,
Preston.
Keith Preston, who's great because he's kind of in a way not part of our movement. I
That's
mean,
true.
he's
Yeah.
an anarchist, but he's someone who's willing to talk to us and talk with us, and who we can learn from. So I think that's great. My friend Roman will be there. Michael Hill, who's actually a Southern nationalist, is going to be there. I added him a little bit later because I thought it was just necessary because of this attack on Southern heritage that is ongoing. And then Robert Taylor is actually going to be there. He's from the band Changes, and he's actually going to perform some
Nice.
music for us. So basically, I felt that you have to have great speakers, but at the dirty secret of conferences is that people ultimately don't come to hear the speakers. They I can go up there and bloviate, but truly people are there to meet people and just to be together. And so that's why I've really tried to make this conference as a communal event with entertainment and festivities and socializing. So we're going to actually have the meat of the conference will take place on October 31st, Halloween, during the day. And so we'll have speeches and there'll be some exhibitors and so on and so forth. We'll have very good food. And then actually in the evening, we're going to be a little more laid back. So we're going to get, it's going to be casual, no ties allowed. There'll be food that will be very good food, but it'll be kind of you get to take it, pick up your plate, walk around, meet people. There'll be a bar actually in the room where we are at in the evening, so everyone will be thoroughly lubricated and marinated. And Robert Taylor will perform. We'll have some other people talking. So my hope is that and then actually we're in the heart of Washington D.C. So Washington D.C. I guess is a terrible place. It's the belly of the beast, but it's
Yes.
also a place where they've got good bars and it's a big city. And so my hope is that midnight of October 31st, November 1st, people will have forgotten most speeches they listened to, but they will have made new friends and they would have had a good time and are kind of drunk. That is my goal. And
Plus, it's Halloween. We can celebrate
it's
a
Halloween,
pagan
yes.
celebration. I find too, it's almost like ethno church. It's like a holy feeling when like-minded people get together. That's what I've experienced when I've gone to a couple of these conferences now. That's how I can explain it. It's a holy feeling when all these people come together.
It absolutely is. I mean, and that's why I think that's in a way why Christianity is still going, even though very few people really truly believe in it. And that is that it's just about coming together on Sunday. It's a ritual. It's about singing in a choir. There's something deeply therapeutic about singing. I mean, I mean, as most people, I love singing, in the shower or when I'm driving around. There's something wonderful about singing, about resonating, and people singing in a choir. It's euphoric, when you're in tune with your neighbor. And I think that's kind of what we're doing. We might do a little communal singing, in fact.
Nice.
We can find a song that we all know. But yeah, it's about being in tune with your neighbor and sitting next to someone who's on the same page with you. And yeah, that it is absolutely, it is like church and the best way. I think sometimes our conferences have been a little bit too much like graduate school in the sense that, we all go and a presenter speaks and we ask questions. And I think that's good because this is an intellectual movement, but it can't only be about that. We can't let that predominate over the social aspects about meeting people and drinking and making jokes and so on and so forth. And so hopefully that will be, what we can accomplish at the MBI conference.
Well, we'll definitely be there too, but let everyone know how they can get tickets.
Well, the best way is you could just Google NPI conference, become who we are, my name, or something like that. That would probably lead you there. Or you could go to npievents.com. So that's N is in Nancy, P is in Peter, I is in Indiana, events.com. And you can register there. We actually, we actually also have some events that are coinciding with the conference. There's a dinner on Friday and a brunch on Sunday, and you would just come. We still have about, I think we have 9 remaining of millennial tickets. And so if you are 30 years old or younger, you can actually attend everything, get the food, get everything for $100. And so we've really subsidized things for younger people because we know that, we like to have younger people there, but we also know that young people are dealing with a terrible economy and student loan debt and all that kind of nonsense. We want to make it a lot easier. And so, yeah, I mean, I really hope people come. It's going to be intellectually stimulating. I can guarantee that just because, we have McDonald and Faye and Jack Donovan, Preston, me, Michael Hill. But I think more than that, it's going to be, socially invigorating. You really will. You'll feel a part of something. And I think that's really the whole point of it. So, mpievents.com, you can go there, you can register, and, hopefully you can be at the Ghoulish Halloween Fest on October 31st.
Well, Richard, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, the pleasure's mine. Thank you.
To our East Coast listeners, get your butt to the NPI conference in Washington, D.C. on Halloween. I know it'll be worth it. You can meet up with like-minded folks, be yourself, and think subversive thoughts in the belly of the beast. Sounds like fun to me. As I said, there really is something special when we can come together and focus our intentions and goals. It's important to do this regularly, in my view, for morale, for folkhood, for strategic planning and reassessing, but of course there's a massive spiritual element to this as well. We'll be there, so hope to see you there. Go to npievents.com to get a ticket. And don't forget, you can hear all our programs found in our archives by signing up for a Red Ice membership. Radio 314 interviews are free for 1.5 years before we archive them. Our archives are incredibly diverse. We haven't always been so unapologetically pro-European, that's for sure. But as Richard said, it's a valuable aspect that many of us have taken different paths to get to where we are now having this conversation. Have a great evening. We'll talk soon.